Arlan is an absolute beast, but he's not very easy to build. He's actually one of the more complex characters in Honkai Star Rail as well. And the reason for that is he feels very uncomfortable to new players. Keeps playing at low life, as well as when he uses his skill, he saps a bit of HP. Without many shielders in the game currently, of course, a lot of us might be rating him a little bit lower in terms of tier list. But in this video, I'll be teaching you how to build a very proper functioning team for Arlan and also to maximize his potential. Do I think he's good? I think he's really strong with the right investment and right team comp as well. For those of you who don't know, he has tons of damage bonuses in his entire kit, as well as together with a lot of destruction light cones, but he does need a lot of crit rate and crit damage stats, and he also wants energy restoration, as his ultimate multipliers are pretty insane if you ask me for a 4-star character. So okay, let's not waste time. First things first, free to play team comp in terms of no gacha, which even possibly might be his overall best comp as well. I think his best pairing is Might 7. I don't know why everywhere I look on the internet, no one is recommending Might 7 together with Arlan. So Might 7 actually combos very well to him because he uses her shield on Arlan, and Arlan gets to have that defensiveness, draws aggro to himself, so he gets hit more, lowers his HP even more to get that damage bonus. And once he's, for example, below a certain HP threshold, he gets all of his multiplier bonuses as well. And also Might 7's shield no longer draws aggro, which means it prevents him to tip down to that death mark as well. So I think these two work extremely strong. It also taps on Might's ability to counter attack. So I would say Arlan should be put on the extreme left slot here. Might 7 will be in the second slot here, and you will want to draw the aggro directly to Arlan. This can only be done with Might 7 because she is the only one in the game currently with redirect aggro. He himself has also self-cleanse, especially if like there's enemies who give like multiple buffs, for example like defense down, attack down. He is able to cleanse it quite often as well, because in his E2 he also has the ability, when he uses his ultimate or skill, he gets to cleanse one debuff from himself. Combo together with Might 7, her shield, when she casts it on him, gets rid of the debuff also, allowing him to get rid of that pesky frozen or imaginary debuff on him as well. It's really solid in terms of this combination, works really well. He doesn't really like getting healed too much, but if you have E6 Might 7, that a little bit of heal is very nice for him, because he does need to sustain a bit for himself in order to use his skill. Not only that, if you direct the aggro to him, and he draws the aggro, he actually gets more energy restoration, because when you get hit, you also restore a lot more energy, which indirectly means he deals more damage too, because his ultimate is up a little bit more. So okay, a bit of explanation on that part. Who else do I think is good in the 3rd and 4th slot? I think it really depends on what is your enemy comp that you're running. These two on the own is really solid. If you are under leveled pushing content, you likely will want more sustain. You want a character, for example like Natasha, to add a little bit more sustain. But if you, for example, are not really too bothered about it, I think a character that can work pretty well is Qingque. He is generally net neutral with Might 7 as well. Might 7, after you put up the shield, she can do auto attacks pretty fine. He doesn't consume any more skill points after you put up that shield in terms of these two together. So these two are generally net positive in terms of skill points, allowing you to have that gacha spamming of her skill very well in the slot number 3 as well. Last slot, you could run, for example, a Harmony character like Esta, as both of them do like to act more often. She benefits well with attack, she benefits well with attack. More speed, more turns for the entire team also means that she gets her gacha a lot more. And for those of you who have a gacha edition, perfect to play her in here, this slot as well. I think I really like Qingque together with Arlan as a DPS pair, because he really doesn't care about skill points that much as well. Especially if you're going to use a skill point anyway, because you're going to shield up your team or heal up your team, I think it's pretty good. In terms of harder content, this team might not be able to sustain very well in terms of AoE damage, as you don't have AoE sustain. Might 7 is more of a single target unit, so you can just feel free to switch this last slot if you wanted to run these 3 together. Depending if there's a lot of AoE, run Natasha. If there's no AoE or like more single target, run Esta. I think this is a very solid free-to-play team comp to start off with. And let's talk in terms of what happens if we add a little bit more gacha into this mix. How will I change it up as well? To be really honest, I won't switch up Might 7 from this whole entire lineup. There's no other character, defensive character or gacha character that works well with Arlan, because of his playstyle liking to be a very low life. Might 7 is like perfect for him. And so these two will be together. Slot number 3 is where it can change up a little bit. You could play, for example, we didn't mention Serval previously, but Serval is of course an option as well in the free-to-play team comp. She's generally okay to use more skill points. She does more damage as well, but she's also fine using her normal skill as she deals damage if enemies are shocked as well. Other than that, I think Pella is pretty good in slot number 3 for AoE defense break on the enemy, allowing Arlan to do a lot more damage as well. Combined together with Esther, you basically have an attack buff on your whole team, a defense shred on the whole entire enemy team, allowing Arlan to do a lot of damage. Especially if there are only less than 3 or less mobs, his ultimate ability will splash very nice numbers and nice multipliers as well. These two also offer a lot of freeze for the enemy, so especially on floors that enemies can be frozen or Remembrance Force in Simulated Universe, I think these two work very well together. Again, in slot number 4, you could run Harmony character like Tingyun here to buff a bit more in terms of Arlan, give her a bit more skill points as well. It is possible in a more hyper carry team, but I do think that if you, for example, want to run Tingyun, I would recommend you run it, for example, in a slot that is not together with your defensive option, because if you are playing hyper carry, you want Arlan to do all the damage and make sure that he survives well as well. So I would recommend you put Natasha here for a bit more sustain. Might 7 maybe can be your sub DPS as well if you are, for example, running this top team over here. In that case, you want to run Might 7 in terms of more damage potential, so that you at least have a bit more damage for Might 7. Tingyun can just dedicate all her time on Arlan to just buff him up, give him a lot of energy restoration to have his ultimate burst ready. Natasha sustains the whole team. I know it's kind of unintuitive because if you sustain him, he loses damage because he doesn't get the multiplier. But then again, if you don't have his E4 and he's just dying, then you will have to restart quite often as well. So those are some consideration you want to take. But now, let's go into his 5-star comps where we add a little bit more 5-star characters, and that is when I think you will see a lot of variance in terms of recommendation for what we see here as well. So if we are playing Arlan in a 5-star team, the first character that you can consider switching out, I would say you can swap out Mark 7 for a character like Japad. Japad's shield is extremely strong, which is exactly what he needs. He doesn't want to take too much damage, especially he has this natural ability where his skill just slowly drains himself down to a very low amounts of shielding. So in a sense, Japad works perfectly fine because he just puts out that chunky shield, redirects the aggro away from Arlan, and he can slowly just do a lot of damage on the side. He doesn't take up too much skill points as well. He's fine auto-attacking, although if he uses his skill, he does have a chance of freezing. If you build him a bit more for effect hit rate, also does add a bit of CC crowd control to the entire team as well. Very solid. I think he's probably his best 5-star option. If you were to ask me any other character that I would actually play maybe away from Arlan, the only other option that I am thinking of right now probably is Clara off the top of my head. But let's talk about Japad's team first, because I think this is the most interesting team composition. This is one of the rare team comps that you actually see Blade and Arlan in the same team composition, and that's really because of the shielding that he provides. Both of them play generally at lower life, and if they are at lower life, you want someone to have a very strong team-wide shield so that you are able to sustain all of them. And in that sense, you could probably run a Lota in the 4th slot as well, because when they, for example, get attacked and stuff, he will be able to sustain the whole team up as well. So I think that's pretty nice. The sustain might overheal him a little bit depending on what are your multipliers and stuff like that. But then again, if his HP is too low, because Japad doesn't offer any healing, if his HP is too low, he can't use his skill, which means that he won't be able to even do his skill damage, which does have some multipliers, especially if we look at, for example, E1, he also has additional skill damage increase in terms of his skill ability. So this is probably one of the team compositions that I'm thinking about for Arlan, but it is quite expensive with a couple of 5-star characters. But for those of you maybe who are playing Blade, I think this will be a really good alternative to have. You have good single target damage from Arlan, a decent amounts of AoE damage from Blade as well. So that is one option that you can play. I would play in that sense. I'll play Jingyuan, I'll play Himiko here if you wanted a 5-star. You could of course run Kafka here as well, a little bit more chunky. So anyone that does AoE damage. You could run Welt, for example, in this slot if you're building him a little bit more for DPS, if you're running, for example, a 5-star character. I find that AoE works a little bit better with him because if it's one-on-one, you won't really have that much problems for him. He doesn't really like die too often as well, because if you have his Eidolon 4, he does have the ability to just survive with a little bit of HP or so. So I think that does make quite a bit of difference. 1-to-1 at at least the turn order ratio will be much more balanced. AoE is where he struggles a little bit because the enemies are acting way more than him, so he might not be able to have that turn order for him to move quicker. Last slot here, I do like Bronya also. Bronya takes down his clock in terms of his turn cooldowns, moves him up faster as well, also giving crit damage to the entire team and damage to the entire team as well. I think it's pretty strong for him. He tends to be a little bit slow, especially if you don't have a speed buffer. You could of course run Tingyun, you can run Esta in this team composition. I think it's perfectly fine as well. If you run Tingyun, the question here is, do you hyper carry Arlan or do you hyper carry your slot 3? If you're running maybe Kafka or, well, perhaps it's Arlan, but I think if you're running Jingyuan, Himiko, likely you'll be buffing the 5-star a little bit more than Arlan. So I think those are like some things to consider. I prefer Esta or Bronya if you want like a hybrid DPS, double DPS kind of lineup. So just giving you guys options and stuff to consider, different combinations of team composition you can build. And I think let's just end it off with one last one, and we're going to talk about Clara's team comp. I think Clara works really fine with Arlan as well. She redirects aggro, and by having a damage dealer here, you don't really need these guys really. These guys can like move aside right now, and we will talk about in terms of slot 3 and slot 4. Slot 4 I think remains more or less the same. Use your buffers, or you could also put, for example, your debuffers like, well, you can put Pella here, you can put Silver Wolf if you wanted to in this slot as well. So this will be like your focus around debuffing, buffing, depending on what you need. These are your damage dealers. They both do decent amounts of AoE damage, strong single target damage also. So together they basically make up for the deficit in terms of the AoE, the splash which is slightly reduced. So I think it's pretty fine in terms of the AoE aspect. Especially if you play with like Welt or Pella, they more or less satisfy the AoE requirement also. Slot 3 is where it gets a bit more defensive. I think, in my opinion, Natasha Bailu will be the best case here. In some cases, if you're running, for example, Japat here, you have a bit of redirect aggro from slot 3 and slot 4, but note that Japat doesn't taunt. So technically speaking, you're not guaranteed to hit your slot 3 either, especially if you don't wear light clones that give you like additional drawing aggro, because she also has an inbuilt aggro in her kit. So that is something to consider. Increased aggro is not guaranteed. So if you need, for example, a team-wide shielding and you have Japat open and maybe you don't have a healer, it's not a no, you can't build him here. I think it's pretty good to split out your damage across your entire team as well, rather than like having one person tank all the damage. And if you don't have any healer, how are you going to sustain that one character? So those are some things to consider. I think if you have a surplus in healers, you could of course run Natasha Bailu here as well. Natasha gives a bit of cleansing, very useful, especially if your Clara, who's drawing the aggro, is getting a lot of hits. Do like and subscribe for more of such future content. I have a lot of other build guides on the channel, so if any character that you're interested in, I've probably done it already. If not, leave a comment below, I'll expedite that as well. Thank you so much for watching. Do check on these two other videos right here as well, and see you in the next video.